I noticed the new alpha by the sound of his footsteps, too even, too controlled, too confidently saying, "I'm in charge here." Sure. We'd see about that. High Ridge Pit throbbed around me like a second heartbeat. Concrete walls sweated with condensation and old blood. Metal beams crisscrossed the ceiling, holding up rattling industrial lamps, and strips of neon that painted everything in bruised blues and sickly reds. The air was thick with iron and sweat, fried food grease, cheap cologne, and the restless charge of too many wolves pressed into one underground box. Alphas swaggered near the betting rail, scent-heavy and loud, posturing like peacocks with better teeth. Money changed hands. Voices rose in arguments about odds and favorites. Omegas lingered in the shadows, some with handlers, some alone, all doing their best to be smaller than they were. I was the only one walking through the center of it all like I owned the place. Zane. Champ. Yo, undefeated, you gonna make it quick tonight? I gave the shouting a lazy half-smile, shoulders loose, gait unhurried. Predatory, but unbothered. That was the mask they'd come to expect. Inside, my nerves were wire-tight. Not from fear. From discipline. I don't lose. Not because my ego is fragile. Not because the title of champion means anything outside this concrete basement. I don't lose because the last man who beat me went into the ground 8 months later. And the one before that. And the one before that. Correlation isn't proof, sure. But I don't like taking chances with people's lives. Especially when the thing etched under my skin whispers mine whenever someone gets close to knocking me down. The mark pulsed faintly now, a warm coin of heat under my ribs. Not angry. Not yet. Just awake. Place your bets. Place your bets. Odds on Zane are 4-1, you heard me, 4-1, don't cry later. The announcer bellowed from his booth above the cages. It's not even worth it, someone grumbled by the rail. You don't bet against him. Waste of cash. New guy's ex-military, another voice argued. They say he's a machine. I'm telling you, tonight's the night. I rolled my neck, joints popping, more out of habit than need. New guy. Ex-military. Machine. Cute. The corridor to the cage opened ahead of me, a narrow tunnel of concrete lit by a single buzzing strip of light. That was when I heard him again, those same measured footsteps from earlier, somewhere at the far end. He appeared a second later. Tall. Broad-shouldered without looking overbuilt, every inch of him cleaned down to efficiency. Dark hair cut short at the sides, a little longer on top, not quite regulation but close enough to feel like a ghost of it. He moved like he'd been taught to conserve energy, to spend muscle only when necessary. His eyes were what made my skin prickle. Gray. Not cold in the dramatic villain in a movie way. Colder in a practical way. Like a winter morning sky. Clear, assessing, ready to decide if you were worth the warmth of a coat. The handlers fell quieter as he passed. I caught the whispers trailing his back. That's him. Yeah, that's Nolan. Former Special Forces or something. Looks cocky. No, that's not cocky, that's confident. Nolan. Good to know what to put on the grave. He stopped when he saw me. I stopped when I saw him. The noise from the arena outside dulled, like someone turned down the volume on the world. For a moment there was just the two of us in that humming fluorescent corridor, concrete and metal and distance between us. Most alphas looked at me like they'd already decided what I was. Prey, threat, trophy, anomaly. Their scent pushed, heavy and aggressive, testing the air for Omega obedience. His gaze settled on me like a weight, weighing, calculating. And yeah, under the practiced slow blink and relaxed jaw, my instincts recognized him for what he was, alpha. Strong, dangerous, very capable of putting me on my back if he got the chance. The mark under my ribs warmed, slow and warning. Easy, I told it silently. We're just looking. He waited for the usual thing to happen. For my eyes to drop, my head to tilt, my posture to fold even a fraction in deference. I smiled instead. Not big. Just enough to show I'd noticed his game and refused to play it. Then I lifted my chin and met his gaze head on, bright and rude and deliberate. Well? His brows twitched. It was tiny. But I saw it. Then, like a crack in stone, one corner of his mouth tugged upward. Not a smirk, not mockery. An almost smile. My heartbeat did something inconvenient in my chest, stumbling, then slamming into a faster rhythm. The mark flared with it, heat blooming outward in a faint, possessive throb. I had no idea which of them was reacting to what. Why the hell is he smiling? Next up. The announcer's voice boomed, the spell shattering. In this corner, you know him, you bet on him, you fear him, our undefeated champion Zane. And facing him tonight, new blood to the pit, fresh from the front lines, Nolan Creed. The crowd screamed his name like they owned it already. I broke eye contact first, turning toward the cage entrance and pushing forward before I could overthink it. Light hit me hard as I stepped out, a white-hot glare from overhead, the neon strobing around the octagon. The metal of the ramp flexed under my bare feet, the roar of the crowd slamming into me with the familiar high of adrenaline. Zane! Zane! Kill him! Don't you dare lose tonight, champ! I climbed through the cage door with easy feline grace, bouncing once on the mat. The ref checked my wraps, patted down my shoulders. My muscles thrummed with energy, trained and honed over years of fighting for survival in places like this. Under my ribs, the mark unfurled a little more heat, like coals stirring. Win, it whispered in the back of my mind. That old echo. Or I will choose. I brushed my hand casually over my chest, fingers pressing the spot. For half a second, then let it drop before the ref could notice. The opposite cage door clanged open. Nolan stepped in. Up close, he looked even more like bad news in a nicely controlled package. No tattoos, no flashy shorts with slogans, no mouthguard color-coordinated with his ego. Just plain, dark fight shorts, white tape on his knuckles, and that same unshakable stance. He moved to his corner like he'd done this 1,000 times, even if he hadn't. No hesitation, no theatrics. The crowd booed a little at his lack of showmanship, then shouted louder to compensate. His scent pressed against mine, alpha dominance testing the air. My omega instincts flickered, wanting to flinch, to yield. I smiled wider instead, rolling my shoulders and shaking out my hands, letting my own presence flare, not an alpha's crushing wave but something sharper, colder, more precise. I'd built this persona so carefully that sometimes even I forgot where the mask ended. We walked to the center when the ref waved us in. Touch gloves, the ref said. Nolan held his out, steady. For a heartbeat, our gazes locked again. Those gray eyes weren't bored now. They were focused entirely on me, dangerous. Not just because he was strong, because he was paying attention. I tapped my gloves to his, quick and light. His voice, when he spoke, was low enough that only I heard it. Don't blink, he said. I huffed a soft laugh. You first. We stepped back to our corners. The ref's arm rose. Fight. Nolan didn't rush. Most guys came at me like wildfires, burning hot and fast. Nolan advanced like a storm, steady, measuring, no wasted motion. Guard up, chin tucked, eyes never leaving my center of gravity. His first jab snapped toward my face with surgical precision. I slipped it by a hair, feeling the wind of it brush my cheekbone. Okay, not a brawler. He followed with a low kick, fast and clean, aiming to knock my balance out from under me. I checked it, shin meeting shin with a dull, satisfying crack that vibrated up my leg. We circled, feet whispering over canvas. He was reading me. I could see it in the tiny adjustments he made, the way his gaze catalogued every faint shift. Fine. Read this. I let my body fall into the familiar dance, sliding just out of reach, teasing angles, offering targets then snapping them away. The crowd lived for the show, for the near misses, the gasp-worthy almost knockouts. Tonight though, the choreography didn't feel as smooth. Twice, he changed his combination mid-strike in a way that forced me to move faster than planned. A third time, he feinted high, then swept low, his shin slamming into my thigh hard enough to sting. Pain flared, bright and immediate. The mark pulsed in answer, heat licking across my ribs like an irritated animal. Fast, he said between exchanges, breath steady. You're faster than your tapes. You watched my fights? I ducked under a hook and tapped his ribs with a short, sharp punch. I'm flattered. Research, he replied, eyes glinting. Don't get excited. I snorted, dodging another strike. Too late. The round stretched, air around us charged and humming. I could feel the precise weight of his attention, the way he adjusted to me as quickly as I adjusted to him. He fought like a man who'd been trained to kill. Efficient. Brutal where it counted. No ego in his fists. Which would have been a real problem, if I were allowed to lose. The mark's warmth grew, spreading under my skin, a low, sick-sweet buzz. Win, it insisted. Win. I moved. Duck, slip, counter. My body knew this song far too well. I let the rhythm take over. Let my instincts and the mark's push blend into something lethal and fluid. Nolan's guard cracked for half a second. I stepped in. My fist connected cleanly with his jaw, snapping his head to the side and sending him stumbling to one knee. The arena exploded. Nolan's down. Finish him, Zane. Come on, champ. I stood over him, chest heaving, heat roaring under my ribs like a barely leashed fire. For one long, taut moment, we just stared at each other. He could have looked away. Most did. He didn't. He lifted his head slowly, blood at the corner of his mouth, eyes narrowed, and held my gaze as he pushed himself back to his feet. The ref moved in, checked him quickly, then stepped aside, letting the fight continue. Nolan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, glanced at the red there, then looked at me again. And there it was, the tiniest curve of his lips. "You move too beautifully to be just a fighter," he said, voice hoarse but oddly gentle. The understatement punched harder than any of his hits. For a second the crowd, the lights, the sweat, the mark burning under my skin, all of it went distant, blurred, beautiful. Not deadly. Not cursed. Not freak. I didn't answer. Didn't know how. We finished the round. I won. Cleanly, decisively, without unnecessary damage. It was enough for the pit, enough for the money, enough for my rule. I stepped out of the cage after the announcer screamed my name to a hysterical crowd. My legs felt steady. My breathing was even. My body knew this walk back to the tunnel too well. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up all the same. Halfway down the corridor I felt it. The weight of a gaze on my spine. Not hungry. Not hateful. Just fixed. I didn't have to look back to know who it belonged to. And for the first time in years, the idea that someone was still watching me after a fight didn't annoy me. It unsettled me. And, worse than that, it made something in my chest quietly, traitorously, thrill. The showers were always the quietest place in the pit after a fight. Damp concrete, flickering lights, the constant drip 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 from pipes older than I was. The steam did nothing to hide the metallic smell of the arena. If anything, it made it cling harder to the skin. I stood at the rusted row of sinks, washing sweat and blood from my hands. The water ran pink, then clear. I stared at my knuckles, flexing them once. My reflection in the cracked mirror smirked back, looking more relaxed than I actually felt. Behind me, footsteps echoed in the hollow space. Of course they did. "You wash your hands terribly," a low voice said. I didn't turn. "Do the first?" "Yeah." The voice came closer, then stopped at my side. "There's dirt trapped under your knuckles." I flicked a glance sideways. Nolan. Hair damp from a quick rinse, wearing nothing but sweatpants and the coldest expression I'd ever seen on someone who had just complimented me mid-fight. His presence spread through the narrow room like a change in air pressure. Quiet, dense, impossible to ignore. "That's not dirt," I said. "It's victory." He huffed something like a laugh. "Cocky," says the guy narrating my hand-washing technique. Nolan leaned his hip against the sink next to mine, arms crossing over his chest. His gaze dragged down my arms, my hands, then back to my face, slow, assessing. Not dominating. Not threatening. Studying. His scent pressed forward, not overwhelming, just insistent, like he wanted to know what I smelled like in return. I hated that my instincts noticed. "You didn't look scared in the cage," he said. "I wasn't. You should have been. That why you lost." His jaw flexed once. "I didn't lose. You hit the floor," I reminded him, flicking my fingers under the faucet. "Pretty sure that's losing." He didn't bite. His calm only deepened, which was somehow more irritating. "Why weren't you afraid?" he asked again, quieter this time. This close, his eyes weren't icy. They were sharp, focused, curious in a way that scraped right under my ribs. Why wasn't I afraid? Because fear around alphas gets omegas killed. Because fear turns the mark into a weapon. Because I'd been punished enough for being weak, but I didn't feel like handing him those truths. So I shrugged. "Because you're not dangerous," I said lightly. His brows rose. "I'm not?" "Nope. Very safe. Like a guard dog that knows basic commands." His lips twitched. That same, almost smile. "I could break your jaw." "Anyone could," I countered. "Doesn't mean they will." His eyes narrowed the tiniest bit, and I felt that tension coil in. The air between us, something taut, humming, irritatingly electric. He stepped just slightly into my space. Not enough to crowd. Just enough to test. I held his gaze and dropped my voice. You done watching me wash my hands, soldier? Not really. The worst part was the way he said it. Calm, straightforward, without an ounce of flirting. As if observation itself was a mission he intended to complete. I should have walked away. Instead, I grabbed a towel, wiped my hands and pushed past him toward the exit. His footsteps followed. Fantastic. The coincidences started the very next day. First, he showed up at the training hall. I was mid-combination, sweat rolling down my spine, when I felt him before I saw him, like someone turned the gravity up a notch. He didn't say anything at first. Just leaned against the wall, arms crossed again, watching. Not staring at my body the way arrogant alphas did, waiting to see me falter. Watching the way a tactician watches an opponent's strategy unfold. I ignored him for as long as I could. About 5 minutes. Then he moved closer. Too close. He circled the edge of the ring, steps slow and even, eyes tracking every pivot of my hips, every shift of my balance. I heard the trainers whispering. Why's he here? Is he scouting? Does he want a rematch already? I wanted to tell them I had no idea and that it wasn't my fault alphas had a new stalker template. Between rounds he approached the ropes. You're dropping your right guard, he said. I blinked at him. No, I'm not. You do it when you breathe out. I don't. I started, then cursed internally because he wasn't wrong. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. You always this annoying? Usually. I climbed out of the ring. Nolan stepped back, barely a step, but his presence still brushed over my senses like static. His next words were too soft for anyone else in the gym to hear. You trembled. My breath hitched. No, I didn't. A little. I swallowed hard. The mark pulsed once under my skin, a warning or a reminder. I couldn't tell which. Don't get close. Don't let him in. Don't give him something to take. But every time I tried to put distance between us, he closed it effortlessly, like he didn't understand the meaning of space, or boundaries, or how damn distracting he was. The third time he accidentally ran into me, this time in the hallway outside. The locker room, fresh from a shower, smelling clean and sharp, I snapped. You're following me. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, You didn't answer my question. What question? Why weren't you afraid of me? He wasn't letting it go. I forced my face into a smirk I didn't feel. Because I'm not stupid enough to fear someone who hesitates. His eyes darkened. Just a shade. I don't hesitate. You did last night. He exhaled once, slow. You don't act like an omega. And you don't act like an alpha, I shot back. We stood there in the dim corridor, steam drifting from the showers, voices echoing faintly from the gym beyond. The space between us crackled. Too dangerous. Too interesting. Too close. He leaned in an inch, not touching, just tipping forward like he wanted to see what I'd do. I didn't move. That was the problem. Nolan studied my face for a long moment. Then, You're complicated. And you're irritating. He smiled, small, real this time. Then we're even. We weren't. Not even close. Because every instinct I had was screaming that this man was the one thing I couldn't afford. And the one thing my body kept leaning toward anyway. The worst part? I wasn't sure which version of me he was going to break first. The training hall always felt different after midnight. Most wolves hated being alone in open spaces. Instinct, biology, whatever. So the place emptied out fast, once the evening fights ended. But I liked the quiet. The stillness. The chance to breathe without a crowd chanting my name like it was both worship and accusation. The overhead lights were half off, bathing the room in muted gold. Punching bags swayed subtly from earlier sessions. Ropes hung slack around the empty rings, and the faint scent of rubber mats mixed with sweat and disinfectant. I wrapped my hands slowly, savoring the ritual. Left, right. Tight but not too tight. My knuckles flexed beneath the tape. The quiet was perfect. Until it wasn't. You're avoiding me. His voice slid through the silence like it belonged there. I sighed without turning around. You're everywhere. I'm persistent, he corrected. You're annoying. Persistent, he repeated. I turned then, and there he was. Nolan, standing a few feet away, hands loose at his sides, posture a picture of controlled strength. His hair was still damp from a shower, curling just slightly at the ends. And shadows from the dim lights carved sharper angles into his face. He looked like a problem I hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Or, one I didn't want to. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You're lying. About what? About everything. His gaze flicked over me, sharp as a blade. About why you won't look at me the same way you look at everyone else. Why you avoid me. Why you... Okay, I cut in. That's enough psychoanalysis for one night. You're still lying. I rolled my eyes and finished taping my right hand. If you came here for a confession, you picked the wrong wolf. I came here for honesty, he said, and stepped into my space just enough that I had to tilt my chin up a little to meet his eyes. Do you even know what that feels like? A muscle in my jaw jumped. Get in the ring. He blinked once. You want to fight? No, I said dryly. I want to knit sweaters. Of course I want to fight. Something flickered in his expression, like interest sharpening into something warmer, more dangerous. We climbed into the ring. The ropes creaked under our weight. The mat was cool against my bare feet. The silence wrapped around us like something waiting to break. Gloves, or no gloves? He asked. No gloves, I said. Let's see how honest you can be. His eyes darkened with something that sent a jolt down my spine. We circled. I moved first, light, testing him with a quick jab he dodged easily. He countered with a clean low kick that skimmed my thigh. I stepped back, smirked, invited him in. He took the invitation. Soon it wasn't sparring so much as the edge of a fight, sharp breaths, fists grazing, skin, bodies too close. Heat building under my ribs like a slow ember. Every time he feinted, my mark pulsed in answer, a warning flare. Not now, I thought at it. Not him. Nolan swept his leg out, I jumped over it, landed, spun, threw a punch toward his shoulder. He blocked it, caught my wrist, used his weight to pull me forward. Our chests brushed. My breath stuttered. His eyes flicked to my mouth. No, absolutely not. I jerked my hand free and pushed him back. Harder than necessary. He staggered one step, then straightened, lips curling like he knew exactly what had almost happened. You're fast, he said. You're slow. Liar. You know, I said, breath sharp. You're very obsessed with whether or not I'm lying. That's because you're terrible at it. I scoffed. You don't know me. Not yet. My heartbeat lurched. That word again. Yet, as if he'd already decided this was inevitable, we clashed again, fists and feet and breath merging in a rhythm that should not have felt this intimate. Sweat slicked down my spine. The tape around my wrists burned, and every time Nolan's hand brushed my skin, the mark under my ribs heated in warning. He stepped in close, too close, and I dodged a punch only for his palm to land on my shoulder, shoving me backward. My back hit the padded wall with a thud. He didn't touch me again. He didn't need to. He stood inches away, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. His scent washed over me. Steel, cedar, something clean and maddeningly steady. His gaze locked onto mine with surgical precision. You're not an omega, he said. My lungs froze. His voice wasn't mocking. It wasn't curious. It was certain. And that was far more dangerous. I forced my expression into something cold, flat. I'm not. A lie. One I'd said so many times it came out smooth as silk. He didn't buy it. But he misunderstood it. You're afraid to admit you're weaker, he said, voice low, intent. All that bravado. You think it'll protect you? I stared at him. Then nearly laughed. If you knew how wrong you are. If you knew how dangerous it is for anyone to be stronger than me. If you knew what happens to those who win. But I swallowed it. All of it. I leaned in just enough for my breath to brush his jaw. I'm not weak, I said quietly. And I don't owe you an explanation. Nolan's hand lifted, like he might touch my face, then froze halfway. He was breathing harder now, eyes flicking over me like he was trying to solve a puzzle with too many missing pieces. You're hiding something, he said. And you, I replied, pushing past him and climbing out of the ring, are too curious for your own good. He didn't follow immediately. But when I reached the edge of the hall and glanced back, he was still standing in the ring, hands at his sides, chest rising. Slowly, eyes fixed on me, with a hunger that wasn't purely physical. Not quite aggression, not quite admiration. Something worse. Interest. Interest from an alpha was always dangerous. Interest from this one felt fatal. The pit had two kinds of nights. The kind where the crowd came for blood, and the kind where they came for a miracle. Tonight, They wanted both. Revanche. Revanche. Zane versus Nolan round 2. Drop him this time. Finish it. The roar of it rattled through my bones, vibrating the metal beams overhead. Lights strobed in a frantic rhythm, casting the arena in flashes of electric blue and brutal red. The smell of adrenaline was so thick I could taste it. Organizers had barely waited 12 hours after our last sparring session to announce it. A rematch. Their golden ticket. Their circus. And for the first time in a long time, I was nervous. Not because of the fight itself. I knew how Nolan moved now, knew his rhythm, knew how he thought before he acted. But that was exactly what scared me. Predictability meant closeness. Closeness meant danger. The mark under my ribs pulsed, a tight knot of heat like a warning heartbeat. I paced the prep corridor, shaking out my wrists, stretching my neck. I could feel my pulse in places I didn't want to feel it. Jaw, throat, stomach. My breathing wasn't unsteady, but it was too controlled, too measured. The kind of breathing I did when I was preparing for something I didn't want to face. Then the footsteps came. Even steps, measured weight. Military discipline announcing itself before the man appeared. Nolan. He stepped into the dim light of the hallway, and everything in my body tensed, every instinct tightening like a fist. Zane, he said simply. Nolan? I answered too casually. We stared at each other for a breath that stretched. His eyes flicked down my arms, to my stance, to the way I kept shifting my weight like I wanted to run in place. Finally, he spoke. After the fight, he said softly, we talk. Don't run this time. My throat tightened sharply, so suddenly it almost hurt. I hated that he noticed. I forced a smirk. You assume you'll still be standing afterward. I will, he said. And so will you? Too calm. Too certain. I hated how much I wanted to believe him. The announcer bellowed our names from inside the arena, the vibration of it shaking the floor beneath us. Nolan held my gaze for one more long second, too intense, too knowing, before turning and walking toward the cage entrance. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself, ignoring the heat blooming under my ribs. Win. 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 The mark thrummed in agreement. I followed him into the blinding light. The second we were inside the cage, the air changed. The crowd went feral, chanting, stomping, screaming. The scent of too many alphas packing the front rows made the atmosphere heavy and volatile. The ref did his usual spiel, no claws, no shifting, no eye gouging, and stepped back. Nolan's gaze locked on mine like he was anchoring himself there. The bell rang. And the world snapped into motion. He came at me harder this time. No slow circling. No testing jabs. Just pure force wrapped in precision, his strikes sharp as bone saws. His fist clipped my jaw, my teeth rattled. I slid under his elbow, countered with a hook that landed on his ribs hard enough to shake him. Pain flashed in his eyes. He kept going. He wasn't fighting out of strength. He was fighting out of stubbornness. Stupid, burning, relentless stubbornness. The kind that terrified me more than any punch. I dodged a kick, swept his leg, caught his shoulder. He twisted mid-fall, avoiding the mat like he refused to touch it. The crowd screamed our names like we were myth instead of two wolves beating the hell out of each other. Heat flared under my skin. The mark was wide awake. Flaring with every near hit. Stinging with every impact. Pulsing warning warmth at every moment. Nolan closed the distance too much. Stop, I told it sharply. Not him. But it reacted to threat, not logic. And the fight was a threat. Nolan hooked my ankles. I stumbled just enough for him to slam me into the cage wall. The metal rattled behind my spine, and his breath ghosted over my cheek, hot, furious, too close. Stay down, he growled. Make me, I shot back. He tried. I kneed him in the stomach, twisted, broke free, sent him skidding across the mat. My heart thundered. My skin felt too tight. The lights blurred at the edges as the mark pressed for control. Win. 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 Not now. I lunged, drove a punch toward Nolan's jaw with everything I had. He shifted at the last millisecond. And suddenly, he was behind me. Arms around my waist. The fight collapsing into something almost like an embrace. I broke out of it by sheer instinct, spinning, raising my fist. And stopping. Completely. The punch hung inches from his face, my arm tremoring with the force I froze mid-strike. If I landed it, he'd go down. Hard. And if he went down, if he lost, if he took that hit, the mark would choose what happened next. I couldn't let that happen. Not to him. My breath hitched. My knuckles hovered against the heat of his skin. For once, my instincts didn't demand victory. They demanded restraint. Nolan stared at me, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his temple. Slowly he straightened, never breaking eye contact. His voice was a low rasp. "Are you afraid of me?" I swallowed. "No." "Then, why did you stop?" "Because you're the first person I can't afford to destroy. Because the mark reacts to threats. And you're the only threat I don't want it to hurt." But I couldn't say that. So I said the truth I could afford to share. "I'm afraid," I whispered, "of the people who might actually understand me." Silence detonated between us. The ref shouted something. The crowd screamed something else. Neither of us heard it. We were standing too close, breathing the same air, staring at each other like the cage was empty and the world had narrowed to two wolves who had no idea what they were becoming. The bell finally rang. The ref grabbed our wrists, lifted them both. A draw. The crowd erupted in outrage. Rigged. What the hell? No way. Someone should have gone down. Nolan and I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look at the ref or the crowd or the lights. We looked only at each other. A draw meant nothing. We both knew the real fight hadn't even started yet. My apartment was the opposite of the pit, quiet, cold, controlled. Minimalism wasn't a choice, it was a survival mechanism. No photos, no sentimental clutter. A couch, a bed, a shelf with exactly 3 books I never opened. Bare walls painted in a muted gray that matched the city skyline at dawn. Silence pressed against the windows, wrapping the room in a stillness that should have calmed me. It didn't. Because the second the door closed behind me I felt it. The mark. A slow burn under my ribs, pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I walked to the bathroom, flicked on the harsh fluorescent light, and pulled up my shirt. There it was. Thin lines, almost like veins of pale gold, glowing faintly beneath my skin, spreading from the center of my chest outward in fragile branching patterns, radiating, living, warning. I swore softly under my breath. It wasn't supposed to glow unless I was threatened. Or unless the mark was choosing. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered at my reflection. "Not now." I pressed my fingers against the heat, feeling it throb in response. "Stop. Calm down. Not him. Not him." It didn't listen. The mark never listened. My breath came out uneven, and I forced myself to look away from the mirror, gripping the sink until my knuckles whitened. But memories rose anyway. They always did when the mark flared like this. A bright room. Too bright. Sterile white walls. Metal restraints biting into my wrists. The cold sting of needles in my veins. The sickly sweet scent of disinfectant layered over fear. The scientist leaned over me, goggles reflecting my own terrified expression back at me. "You're going to be perfect," he said, voice clinical. "An optimal omega. No fight, no fear." He traced a gloved finger over the sigil burned into my chest, still raw and angry. "Your victor will control you, that is the design. Your body will submit to power, as nature intended." He smiled, thin, proud, monstrous. "But," he added, adjusting something I couldn't see, "if an alpha unworthy manages to defeat you, well, the organism we've grafted should correct that error." Correct. Such a gentle word for what happened. For what the mark became. I remembered the first death. The second. The third. All alphas who'd knocked me down. All confident they'd earned a prize. All found dead within a year. Some in their beds, some in alleys, one in his car. No signs of struggle, no detectable cause. Just gone. Like the mark had performed its own private execution. And now? Now Nolan was getting too close. Too many fights. Too many questions. Too many glances that lingered just a fraction too long. He was walking into the same trap the others had walked into. And if he pushed me, if he really tried to take something from me, the mark would see him as the next victor, and kill him. My chest tightened painfully. I shut my eyes, forcing my breathing to steady. Don't let him get close. Don't let him win anything. Don't let him touch the truth. The knock at the door nearly sent me through the ceiling. 3 slow taps. Measured. Precise. I already knew who it was. "No," I whispered. "Not tonight." I didn't move. Maybe if I stayed silent he'd leave. But the knock didn't come again. Instead, a voice. Zane. Of course. Of course he wouldn't just walk away. I walked to the door on legs that didn't feel entirely stable and pulled it open just enough to see him, but not enough to let him in. Nolan stood there, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but eyes razor sharp. He wasn't here for dominance or intimidation. He was just present, and that was somehow worse. "You look pale," he said quietly. "Wonderful. You showed up to critique my complexion. You're shaking." "I'm annoyed." "You're not annoyed." My jaw clenched. "What do you want, Nolan?" He studied my face, really studied it, like he was reading every flicker of my expression, every tremor of muscle. Finally he said, "I feel like you're losing strength." My breath hitched. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, somewhere beneath the surface. He could see it. And that terrified me more than anything. "I'm fine," I lied, sharper than intended. He leaned an inch closer. Not pushing. Not crowding. Just there. "No," he said softly. "You're not." Something inside me snarled, panic, instinct, fear, all of it tangled. "Leave, Zane." I said leave. He didn't move. Heat flared under my ribs. The mark pulsed harshly, like a spike of lightning under my skin. "Nolan," I snapped, my voice a low growl I barely recognized. "Go away." "No." The simplicity of it hit like a punch. I stepped forward, shoulders rigid, eyes burning. "Do you think I'm joking? I don't want you here." He didn't flinch. "You need someone here." I barked a laugh, sharp, bitter. "I need less of you, not more." He held my gaze, unwavering. "Liar." The mark flared again, a violent wave of heat that made me grit my teeth. "I'm not your responsibility," I hissed. "No," he said. "But you're something." That one word, undefined, open, dangerous, made my heart slam painfully against my ribs. I took a step back. "Nolan, you don't understand what you're doing." "Then explain it." "I can't." "Then let me stay." "I can't." His voice softened just a fraction. "I'm not leaving you alone like this." He wasn't angry. Or forceful. Or dominating. His calm was the kind that made walls crack. And I'd spent too long building mine to let them crumble now. I pushed the door closed slowly, fighting the trembling in my hands. Nolan didn't stop it. Didn't push. Didn't demand. He just stood there on the other side of the wood and said, "I'll be here if you need me." The door clicked shut. But his presence lingered like a gravity I couldn't escape. And the mark under my skin, still glowing, still alive, reacted to him in a way it never had to anyone else. Afraid. Alert. Awake. As if it didn't know whether he was a threat to destroy me, or the one thing that might save me. The kitchen was the darkest part of my apartment at night. No streetlight reached the windows. No hum of the city filtered in. Just a single weak bulb above the counter and the sound of my own uneven breathing echoing off cold walls and colder tile. I stood with my palms flat on the countertop, head bowed, eyes squeezed shut. The mark burned under my ribs, sharp, feverish, alive in a way that made my pulse feel wrong inside my body. Each beat throbbed through it like it wanted out, like it wanted control. Stop. 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 My shoulders trembled with the effort of holding myself still. The worst part? I wasn't shaking from the mark. I was shaking from fear. Real fear, the kind that clawed at the bones. And then, a quiet knock, followed by an even quieter voice. "Zane." I didn't turn. Didn't have the strength to face him. But Nolan came inside anyway, closing the door behind him with a soft click. His footsteps crossed the apartment in those same steady, maddeningly calm patterns. When he finally stopped behind me, the air shifted. Warmer, pressured, unbearably intimate. I gripped the counter harder. "Don't," I rasped. "Don't come closer." He didn't touch me, but he didn't step back either. "You didn't answer your phone." I got worried. "You shouldn't be here." "I disagree." My jaw locked. "Get out, Nolan." "No." The word shattered something fragile inside me. I spun around, anger rising like a shield. "Do you ever listen? I told you." "You're shaking," he said gently, cutting through my fury with terrifying accuracy. I froze. His eyes were soft. Too soft. Reading every fracture in me. "You don't have to be strong right now," he said, voice low. "Not with me." The words landed like a blow. Like a hand around my throat. Like someone reaching through my rib cage. It felt like something cracked open. The thing I'd spent years reinforcing, layer by layer. My composure slipped. My breath stuttered. I didn't want him to see me like this. Not trembling, not fragile, not afraid. But I couldn't pull myself back together fast enough. The mark pulsed again, hotter, brighter, and pain bit down on my ribs like a spiked fist. I gasped and stumbled back, hands slamming against my chest. Nolan took a step toward me. "Zane, don't touch me," I snapped, voice cracking. Just don't. His hands hovered in the air between us, fingers curled like he'd stopped himself at the last possible moment. "Okay," he whispered. "I'm not touching. I'm not moving unless you ask." His restraint somehow broke me even more. My breath trembled, and the mark lit again, like molten gold under my skin, lines brightening in thin, branching patterns across my chest. Nolan's eyes widened. "Zane, what is that?" I swallowed, throat tight. "The truth." Slowly, deliberately, with fingers that barely obeyed me, I lifted my shirt. Light spilled into the dim kitchen. The mark glowed fiercely. Thin lines spiderwebbing from the center of my sternum. Pulsating with each heartbeat, shifting between gold and deep amber. It looked alive. It was alive. Nolan stared at it, stunned and silent. His breath caught, his gaze flickering over every line, every pulse. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Zane." I braced against the counter again, heart pounding. He lifted a hand, slowly, hesitantly. "Can I touch it?" "No!" I barked instantly. He jerked his hand back like I'd burned him. "Okay. Not touching. Got it." His voice was steady, but his eyes... shock. Concern. Fear. Not of me. For me. I hated how much that mattered. "I'm still here," he added quietly. "Even if I don't touch it." I sank onto a chair before my legs gave out. The mark dimmed a fraction, as if reacting to the shift in posture. Nolan stayed standing. Close but not crowding, careful but unflinching. "What is it?" he asked gently. I exhaled shakily. "A mistake." "That doesn't tell me anything." I laughed weakly, more like a broken exhale. "You want the truth? Fine. You asked for it." And I told him. Everything. About the lab. The restraints. The scientist who called me optimal. The mark that was supposed to make me submissive. But instead became something else entirely. A weapon. A curse. A silent executioner for whoever beat me. I told him about the dead alphas. The pattern. The fear that never left. The reason I couldn't let myself lose, not even once. And the worst truth of all. That he was getting close enough to be next. Nolan listened. Really listened. No anger. No disgust. No pity. Just sharp, focused attention. Like he was taking in every word, every tremor of my voice, absorbing it without judgment. When I finally stopped talking, the room was unbearably quiet. Nolan crouched down so we were eye level. He didn't touch me. Didn't even reach out. He just met my gaze with steady, unyielding calm. "You're afraid I'll try to defeat you," he said. My breath hitched. "Yes. You think I want to win you. Every alpha does," I whispered. "They all want something. Ownership, dominance, bragging rights. And the mark, it decides who's unworthy. It kills them." Nolan studied me for a long, almost painful second. Then he said, "Zane, I'm not trying to defeat you." I shook my head. "You don't get it. If you push me in the ring, if you try to take anything, my pride, my body, I don't want to take anything." My voice broke. "Then what do you want?" He inhaled once, slow. "You, without winning, without owning, without conquering anything. Just you." My chest tightened, my throat burning. "And you're wrong," he said softly. "About what?" I whispered. "About me not winning." He leaned closer. Not enough to touch, just enough that his breath ghosted over my cheek. Enough to make the mark pulse, confused. "Zane," he said, voice low and certain, "you think I'm dangerous to you. You are..." "No." His eyes warmed, something fierce and devastating. "Because you're the one who won." My breath caught. The mark pulsed. Not in pain. Not in threat. But in confusion. Heat without sharpness. Light without agony. For the first time, it didn't hurt when he said it. "You already beat me, Zane," Nolan finished. "Long before I walked into this apartment." My heart trembled. The mark glowed once, soft, almost gentle. And I realized, with something like terror and relief tangled in my ribs, for the first time in years, the truth didn't break me. It set something free. I didn't ask Nolan to stay. I didn't have to. After the truth spilled out of me like blood, after the mark dimmed enough that the pain eased into a low, simmering ache, he simply took a chair from the kitchen table, dragged it across the tile, and sat down beside me. Not touching. Not crowding. Just there. My nerves were still frayed. My breaths too shallow. The glow beneath my skin faint but visible. The apartment felt different with him inside it. Less hollow, less threatening. More like a space where breathing didn't have to feel like a fight. "You should go home," I muttered into my palms. "No," Nolan said softly. That was it. No explanation. No argument. Just certainty. He rested one hand on the table between us, not touching me, just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. The distance between us felt like a thin thread, invisible but real, humming with something I didn't know how to name. The mark responded to that warmth. The glow beneath my ribs flickered. And weakened. Not gone. Not harmless. But quieter. Like it didn't know whether to defend me from him or lean toward him. Nolan noticed. I could tell by the shift in his eyes. "It reacted to fear," he murmured. "But it reacts to calm too." "It reacts to everything," I said. "It's dramatic." He smiled, slanted, crooked, too gentle for someone who had tried to choke me with a headlock 2 days ago. Then he stood and wandered around my kitchen like he lived here. He opened a cupboard, found a glass, filled it with water, and set it in front of me. "You're dehydrated." "I'm fine." "Drink." I glared. He raised an eyebrow. I drank. Then he opened the light fixture over the stove, removed the burnt-out bulb I'd been too busy, and too stubborn to change, replaced it with one from a drawer I didn't know he'd found. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Fixing things. You don't live here. If you want me to leave, you'll say it, and mean it." I pressed my lips together, heat creeping into my face. He had me cornered, verbally and emotionally. He wasn't being protective. He wasn't being dominant. He was being nice. And it was killing me. He moved around the apartment with this quiet efficiency, doing stupid, mundane things, straightening a chair, adjusting the thermostat, throwing away the empty takeout container I'd ignored for 2 days. Every small action chipped at my armor like he wasn't even trying. When he finally sat beside me again, I muttered, "You're annoying." "You're welcome." I scowled at him. He smiled wider. And, damn him, I felt my lips twitch. Just once. Barely. He saw it. Of course he saw it. Nolan leaned back in the chair, his posture relaxing for the first time since he arrived. One hand draped carelessly over his knee, the other resting on the table between us again. Close enough that if I moved an inch, we'd be touching. I didn't move. Minutes passed like that, quiet, steady, strangely peaceful, until I felt him shift. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out, not for my hand but for the hem of my shirt, right where the mark glowed underneath. "Don't," I breathed. But the word came late. His fingers touched the fabric above the mark. Not my skin. Just the cloth. But the warmth bled through anyway. I froze. Every muscle locked, every instinct tangled, every breath caught halfway out of fear it wouldn't make it back in. But I didn't pull away. Nolan's touch was feather light, barely pressure at all. His eyes flicked up to mine, searching, asking silently, "Is this okay?" I swallowed hard. "It's fine. Tell me to stop if it hurts," he said. "It always hurts," I whispered. His thumb brushed over the glowing lines. The mark flickered, bright, hot, electric. But it didn't lash out. It didn't bite or burn or try to devour. It hummed. A warm vibration, confused and soft, like a creature unlearning its instincts. Nolan's voice broke the silence. "Zane," he murmured, "why aren't you afraid of me?" I inhaled sharply. "Because you're not trying to dominate me." "I'm not trying to save you either," he said quietly. "Then what are you trying to do?" He held my gaze, steady as ever. "I want to walk beside you, not in front, not behind." The words slammed into my chest so hard I had to close my eyes. The mark flared once, confused, desperate, overwhelmed, then dimmed again. Like it didn't know which command to follow, fight, surrender, or transform. For a moment, I believed, really believed, that maybe Nolan could quiet it for good. Maybe he was the one variable the code had never accounted for. Maybe connection, real, genuine, terrifying, was the thing that broke the logic of the curse. Then the mark surged. A violent jolt of heat. A bright flash of gold exploding under my ribs. My breath punched out of me. Zane. Nolan's voice sharpened. Hey, look at me. But I couldn't. The room tilted, the floor swayed, my vision blurred at the edges. The mark burned, not warningly, not angrily, but like it was short-circuiting, sputtering between collapse and rebirth. "Noel," I began. But the word cut off as my knees buckled. Nolan caught me before I hit the ground, pulling me against his chest. "Zane, stay with me," he said, panicked, raw. I tried. I really did. But the mark pulsed one last time, bright, blinding. And the world went dark. I woke to the soft rustle of sheets and the faint hum of the city through my half-open window. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I felt it, warmth wrapped around my hand. Fingers, large and steady, holding mine like an anchor. Nolan. He was sitting in a chair pulled up to the side of my bed, head tilted slightly forward, eyes half closed in exhaustion. He looked like he'd been fighting sleep for hours, and was losing the battle slowly. I swallowed hard. His thumb rested over my knuckles, moving in tiny, unconscious circles, not possessive, not dominating, just there. I stared at our hands, at the unfamiliar gentleness of it, and something in my chest twisted painfully. He shouldn't be here. I couldn't let him be here. Not when the mark was unpredictable. Not when I didn't know what the last surge had meant. Not when getting close to me had killed men before. I tried to slide my hand out from his. His fingers tightened instantly. His voice was rough when he spoke. "Don't." I froze. His eyes opened slowly, bleary but sharp enough. "You were out for hours." "I'm fine," I whispered, lying automatically. "No," he said. "You're not." The softness in his voice almost shattered me. Almost. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the dizziness crawling up the back of my skull. The sheets felt too warm, the air too thick. I needed to get away before I made a mistake neither of us could walk back from. "I need to go," I said, already swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Nolan shot to his feet. "Zane." "I'm serious." My voice cracked on the word. "I have to leave. I'm dangerous. You saw what happened. You saw." "What I saw," Nolan said, stepping in front of me, "is someone who passed out because he's exhausted, scared, and carrying a burden no one should face alone." I shook my head fiercely. "You don't get it. I'm not safe." "You think I care about that?" "You should." My voice ricocheted off the walls, sharp and desperate. Nolan didn't flinch. I moved toward the door. He stepped into my path. "If you leave," he said quietly, "the mark wins." I stopped cold. His words hit harder than any punch he'd ever thrown at me. "You want that?" He continued. "You want to let the thing that hurt you decide your life? Decide who you get close to? Decide who lives or dies?" I squeezed my eyes shut. "Yes. No. I don't know. I don't know how to want anything without hurting someone. I'm dangerous," I whispered. "I'm broken. I'm—" "Stop." His voice cut through mine, firm, but not cruel. "You're not a curse." I laughed, bitter, shaking. "Everything about me says otherwise." Nolan stepped closer, his chest brushing mine. His warmth seeped into my skin. My breath stuttered. "Zane," he said, and the way he said my name made something inside me collapse. "You are not a curse. You are a person." My throat tightened painfully. "I don't deserve—" "You deserve everything," he said fiercely. "Especially love. Especially choice." I looked up at him, eyes blurring. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." "Why are you fighting for me?" The words broke on their way out. "Why are you risking this?" "Because," Nolan said, voice low and steady, "some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth it." My breath shattered. He wasn't saying it beautifully. He wasn't making a promise. He wasn't romantic or poetic or perfect. He was just honest, raw, steady, unflinching. And I didn't realize I was crying until Nolan's fingers brushed my cheek, not wiping the tears, just acknowledging them, grounding them. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I don't know how to be close to someone without breaking them." "You won't break me," he murmured. "You don't know that." He exhaled slowly. "Then let me decide what I'm willing to risk." I pressed my forehead into his collarbone because I couldn't stand or breathe or hold myself together anymore. "Nolan," I choked, I know, he whispered back. I'm right here. The mark flared. A sharp, bright flash of heat. Then, another, then, silence. Not absence, not death, not collapse. Just quiet. Like a storm finally ending. Like something unclenching for the first time in years. I lifted my shirt with trembling fingers. Nolan looked down with me. The lines across my chest, the glow, the living, pulsing light, were gone. All that remained was the faint outline of a scar, pale and harmless. I stared, unable to breathe. Nolan's hand slid gently over mine, steadying it. It broke, he whispered. Zane, it's gone. My vision blurred again, hot and overwhelming. A sob tore out of me, ugly, real, shaking my whole body. I tried to hide it, to swallow it back, but Nolan pulled me into him before I could. My hands fisted in his shirt as I cried, really cried, for the first time since the lab, since the mark, since the fear became my constant shadow. He held me through all of it, arms around my shoulders, face buried in my hair, breath steady against my temple, no pressure, no demand, just presence. When I finally looked up, my voice was wrecked. You stayed? Of course I did. Why? He cupped my jaw, thumb brushing my cheek, not to wipe the tears, but to acknowledge them. Because you're worth staying for. And in the stillness that followed, for the first time in my life, I believed him. The arena didn't look anything like the place where I'd nearly died, twice. Gone were the neon strobes, the blood-stained mats, the screaming gamblers pressed against the cage. The pit had been gutted, rebuilt, repainted and reborn. Now sunlight spilled through wide skylights, illuminating brand new rings, racks of training gear, and rows of punching bags that smelled only faintly of sweat and not at all of desperation. It wasn't an arena anymore, it was a school, a haven, a place where young wolves came to learn control instead of violence. Nolan called it the academy. I called it his kingdom. He pretended to hate that, but judging by the way he walked through the room, chin up, posture perfect, gaze assessing, he didn't hate it at all. I watched him from the edge of the ring as he barked instructions at a group of teenage alphas. Footwork, not brute force. If you rely on strength you'll die stupid. One of the kids flinched. The others straightened like he'd cracked a whip. Yeah. Classic Nolan. You're scaring them again, I called. I'm teaching them, he shot back. You're terrifying them. That's different. I rolled my eyes and hopped into the ring, stretching my shoulders. He noticed immediately, mostly because one of the students tripped while staring at me. Nolan's head snapped toward the kid like a wolf scenting a threat. Eyes front unless you want detention, he barked. The boy squeaked and stared at the floor. I suppressed a grin. This was a new hobby of Nolan's, jealousy and denial. 5 minutes later, as the kids dispersed for water, Nolan trudged over to me with the expression of a man deeply wronged by the universe. Why was that boy looking at you like that? He demanded. No idea, I said innocently. He kept staring, like he had a death wish. Maybe he admires my technique. Nolan glared. Admire it from a distance. I leaned against the ropes, smirking. If he'd seen my mark before it broke, he'd have run the other direction. Nolan's expression softened, just barely. I liked you with the mark, he muttered. But I like you better without it, because now I can actually lose an argument? No. He stepped closer, slipping a hand around my waist. Because now you're free. Free. A word that used to hurt. A word that now fit like a second skin. I glanced around the academy, wolves sparring, laughing, learning without fear. Omegas watching from the stands, no longer shrinking into shadows. The ring beneath my feet felt different too. Not a battlefield. A home. Nolan pulled me into the center of the mat, fingers intertwining with mine. You know, I said softly, it still feels strange. Being here. Not fighting for survival. You're still fighting, he said. Just for something else. What's that? He tugged me closer. A life. Warmth spread through my chest, the kind that had nothing to do with the mark, and everything to do with him. I squeezed his hand. He beat me, I murmured, leaning my forehead against his. Nolan smirked. Damn right. And he lived, I finished quietly, because he never wanted to break me. Nolan's thumb brushed my jaw. Never, he said. The academy hummed around us. Wolves sparred. Laughter echoed. Sunlight warmed the ring. And there, in the center of the place that once held my curse, we stood together, not owner and prize, not alpha and omega, just two wolves who had fought their way into a future neither of us expected, hand in hand.